We have spent 3 days on defining population policy, and we have seen what population policy is, what does it cover, what kind of statements can be called population policy statements, how can we judge effectiveness or success of population policy, what are the difficulties in monitoring and evaluation, and we have also seen a distinction between family planning and beyond family planning factors when it comes to policies regarding fertility control. Now after this, we would spend some time on national population policy of India. So today I will just generally discuss how the national population policy in India has evolved, and in the next lecture I will particularly focus on the statement issued by Dr. Karan Singh, which is also sometimes seen as first population policy statement. Then I will go to Janata policy, and then to latest developments, and particularly the national population policy 2000. So to begin with, I must say that population policy right from the beginning, population policy in India has been more focused on population control programs or fertility control program, and that means family planning. India's population policy does not include anything about migration. There is at least in the so-called first population policy statement by Dr. Karan Singh or Janata policy, there is nothing about migration. There is nothing about social mobility. Population policy in India focuses specifically on how to reduce birth rate. Another component of population process is nuptiality or marriage. Yes, because marriage is closely associated with fertility. So in all policy documents you have some mention of measures to raise age of marriage in the country. As you have seen when we discuss population of India and history of population growth in India, that India entered the second stage of demographic transition around 1921, after which its population started growing at rate more than 1% per year. Till 1921, our fertility was high, average number of children was around 7, mortality was also high, so life expectancy was 20 or 22 years, and the population growth was near zero, or population will sometime rise, sometime fall. The long run tendency of population was to remain almost stationary. After 1921, however, due to industrialization, economic development, more awareness, and development initiatives undertaken by the colonial government, our mortality started improving to some extent, and as a result of that, our rate of growth of population increased. In much of 20th century, right from the beginning, much before independence, there was concern about falling birth and death rates, and Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, in his discovery of India, wrote extensively on falling birth and death rates in the West. Actually, when I read Discovery of India after becoming a demographer, I was surprised to find how Nehru is dealing with the subject of demographic transition in the West in academic rigor no less than the discussion experts or consultants or pure demographers can have. Nehru was a strong supporter of family planning program. Discussing demographic transition, he knew that eventually when mortality has declined, fertility would also decline. But left to itself, it may take a long period of time. And for the purpose of planning in the country, we needed a rapid control of fertility. Therefore, Nehru was in support of family planning program. And the National Planning Committee of Indian National Congress from the beginning supported promotion of family planning as a state policy strongly. In this respect, as you have seen, Nehru also differed from Gandhi. Gandhi supported population control, but he was not in favor of family planning program. And Nehru believed that just brahmacharya or celibacy or natural methods of family planning program would not help. We must have a modern and effective family planning program. This explains how after independence, the government of India recognized the vital role of population control in the overall development of the national economy, and in 1952, India became the first country of the world to launch an official family planning program. There was no country in the world before that with official family planning program. And unrestricted population growth was viewed as a serious threat to all national developmental efforts. Now, over the years, the planners have followed different approaches towards promoting family planning among the masses. And today, I just wish to sensitize you to these different approaches. These different approaches can broadly be grouped into Gandhian approach, clinical approach, extension education approach or simply extension approach, cafeteria approach, coercion, and rights-based approach. While we started cautiously with Gandhian approach, after various experiments in this area, we have settled with a demand-driven, rights-based approach in which greater role is assigned to education, empowerment of women, and meeting the unmet needs rather than attaining family planning targets. So in between you had different experiments. The first experiment was Gandhian. It was thought that in 1952, country was not ready to talk about family planning program or fertility control measures or sexuality, and therefore a cautious, indirect approach would be better, which is also consistent with the value system of Indian society. So brahmacharya being consistent with the value system of Indian society and Gandhiji favoring brahmacharya, we had Gandhian approach. Also because at that time the health minister Rajkumari Amrit Kaur was a devoted disciple of Gandhiji, and they thought that it will be a good beginning if at least we sensitize people to need for population control and propagate only brahmacharya in that. So this module presents three major policy statements issued by successive governments. A statement by Dr. Karan Singh in 1976, a statement by Janata Party government in 1977, 1 year later, and the National Population Policy 2000 statement. Actually, really speaking, this National Population Policy 2000 must be seen as the first declaration of national population policy in India. Before this, like Dr. Karan Singh used to say that he had himself drafted the whole document, and therefore it may be called what was in the mind of the then Health Minister of Health and Family Welfare, and cannot really be called the population policy of India as such, because it was not signed by President of India. To begin with, in Gandhian approach, we started with Gandhian approach because the dominant thinking among the family planning experts in that period was Gandhian. What is Gandhian? They held the view that abstinence or the rhythm method was the most suitable method in Indian program, and the artificial methods of birth control were not only unpracticable, they were likely to be misused and result in moral degradation. At that time, this was the feeling. Only natural methods like raising age of marriage, practicing celibacy or brahmacharya, or in the worst situation, Gandhiji would say, in the worst situation then, if you cannot control yourself, at least follow the rhythm method, which means rhythm method is based on the assumption or based on the fact there are certain days in the menstrual cycle of a woman during which only she can become pregnant. Every month, nearly 14 days before the menstruation starts, a woman releases egg, and if at that point of time she has intercourse and the egg can combine with man's sperm, then fertilization is possible, otherwise not. So that means there are, and since sperm and egg, they can survive for certain hours and for a few days. So there are in between, during the menstrual cycle, in between, there are 4 or 5 days when the chance of pregnancy is highest. And in the beginning of the cycle and toward the end of the cycle, there is no chance of conception. This was rhythm method. Gandhiji would say that use brahmacharya and one should have sexual relationship only when one wants to produce a baby. Going for sex for producing a baby is not the violation of brahmacharya. Then one can have sex once, twice, maybe 3 times, but not more. In the worst case, if you cannot control, then Gandhiji would permit you to go for rhythm method. And interestingly, at some places Gandhiji also accepted sterilization, but that was only for some criminal type of persons. He believed that if somebody is suffering from some diseases which can be inherited by children, so on eugenics ground, he can be permitted to go for sterilization. So for very special cases, he would say that he would permit sterilization, and that too only of males. Gandhiji would not permit sterilization of females, he permitted sterilization of males only. So Gandhian method is essentially the natural method and the rhythm method. Thus a beginning was made with the natural methods, rhythm and withdrawal. The subsequent experience showed that this Gandhian approach was not producing results, and therefore gradually, and as the family planning programmers became more confident, as ministry became more confident, and as consultants and experts developed more confidence in running a family planning program, clinical approach was developed. This approach, as the name itself suggests, clinical approach, included the natural methods of family planning methods and also clinical method. In the first 5-year plan, a small allocation of 65 lakh rupees was made for family planning in the budget, and a number of family planning clinics were opened in the country in different hospitals, particularly in women's hospitals, to provide services to needy people. Clinical methods methods for which the clients were expected to approach doctors or family planning clinics in hospitals, they all can be included in clinical approach. So pills, IUCD, today sterilization, all these methods can be included in clinical approach. The idea was that by then, due to government propaganda, Gandhiji's support, Nehruji's support, and the fact that at several places in the country some family planning clinics were opened due to private initiative in Maharashtra, in Gujarat, at a few places. The time had come to establish clinics where needy people, that already a number of people require controlling fertility and then they are in need of family planning methods. So these people can come to clinics, discuss with the doctors available there, discuss what are all the methods, and they can pick up the method of their choice. The same approach was further extended in the second 5-year plan, and more allocation was made. The budget allocation was raised from 65 lakh to rupees 497 lakh, and organizational structures were developed at the national and state levels. It was realized that for population control, for limiting family size, you require a separate approach, separate strategies other than strategies under health program, and you require separate positions, organizations, roles and responsibilities for running family planning program. So posts of state family planning officers were created in the state, and director of family planning at the center was appointed. So separate administration, this means giving more autonomy. Also creating some positions, fixing responsibilities by creating position of state family planning officers at the state level. Each state would have a family planning officer who will steer the family planning program, through whom funds will flow, through whom strategies will be made, through whom monitoring and evaluation will be done, and who will be basically accountable for the whole program. Then pilot studies were carried out in the first plan, and they had shown that the rhythm method was not effective and people were not prepared for family planning. Two things. One, that the value system of that time, or the level of awareness among people, was such that people were not ready for family planning program. The idea of limiting family size was not popular, and people also did not know about the rhythm method. Why of that time? Even now, I think some 2 months before, I was doing some small field work in Shivpuri district of Madhya Pradesh, and during that field work I learned that during last 30, when I was a student and I asked these questions in field work for my PhD, when is the chance of conception highest? In villages of Etawah district, people said that immediately after the menstruation period is over, chance of conception is highest. The same thing I found in Shivpuri, villages of Shivpuri district of Madhya Pradesh 2 months back. So the knowledge of reproductive cycle is far from exact. Actually, what people say or what people believe in is on the basis of what they see in the natural world. They do not have the expert's knowledge of reproductive cycle. So first, there was not much receptivity towards family planning program, and second, the correct or scientific understanding of rhythm method was not there. So rhythm method or Gandhian approach could not be the suitable approach for running family planning program in India. When in 1961 census, it was found that in place of reducing our growth rate, it increased. So before 1951, population was growing at 1%. Now it was growing at more than 2%. So that means your Gandhian approach and your clinical approach were not yielding. So a question arose: why? What are the main causes behind the failure of the clinical approach? Studies showed that there was a female bias, in the sense that most of the doctors who were made responsible for running family planning program were women. And in Indian society, such major decisions like limiting family size or using family planning methods are not women's decisions. Ours is a patriarchal society, a joint family system, a patriarchal society in which major decisions regarding buying or selling of property, marriages, family size, etc., are taken by men. And since clinical approach neglected men, this was a great limitation in limiting family size at the national level. The lack of general motivation, people were not motivated. You are expecting that people are actually behind clinical approach. You are assuming that people are already motivated, and those who are motivated, those who are needy, will come to clinics and avail services, referral, consultancy services. But this was not case. This was not the case. People were not motivated to limit family size. The value system, the level of understanding, the socio-cultural, political climate were not favorable to family planning program. There were also cultural obstacles, religious obstacles created by joint family system, by kinship, and there was a general ignorance. So opening of a large number of birth control clinics at that time, before educating the people and raising their level of consciousness, was like putting the cart before the horse. What was needed was first to motivate, to make people aware of the need for family planning. What are the advantages of limiting family size for the nation, for the community, and for the individual households, and for individuals themselves. And then only we could expect them to come to clinics. But we opened clinics without sufficiently motivating the people. Females who constituted the target population in the program did not enjoy the same status in the family as in the West, and the westernized Indian planners did not see that in India family planning movement could not get momentum without men's support. So these were some limitations of clinical method. Gandhian method you can ignore. You can say that it was only a stepping stone towards launching a family planning program at a time when climate was not ready to develop a family planning program in the country. But clinical approach is the first serious and scientific strategy towards population control, and it failed because the survey showed that people were not motivated. And therefore something has to be done to motivate the people to limit family size. And this paved the way for what we call extension education approach. Now after clinical approach and spending lot of money to open clinics in hospitals and health facilities other than hospitals, a large number of knowledge, attitude and practice, in short KAP surveys were conducted in the first two plan periods to help the planners in gathering data on knowledge of family planning methods, attitude toward them and practices. What do people know? Are people familiar? Actually much before we try to know whether to what extent people are familiar with different methods, we must know whether they think that it is in their hands to decide how many children they would have. In a traditional society, people think that it is not in their hands. It is God who decides how many children a family will have. Is family size subject to rational control, and how can that control be exercised? Then the issue of knowledge of family planning methods come. And then how many people are practicing family planning. On paper it looks a simple exercise, conducting a survey of knowledge, attitude and practice. But actually it was a very difficult, technically very complicated and complex exercise. How to measure knowledge of family planning methods in general and knowledge of specific methods, how to measure attitudes. Sometimes simple single item based questions were included in surveys to measure attitude. Sometimes some very sophisticated psychometric scales were developed to measure attitudes of people towards a small or big family size and towards family planning. And practice. In practice again there are so many issues, like the issue of ever users, never users, present non-users. But anyway, through these surveys, demographers have had a considerable understanding of people's motivation, knowledge and decision making process. The rising rather than falling growth rate of population created a panic among the planners. On the one hand, we tried to collect a lot of data on knowledge, attitude and practice, and started thinking more seriously what can be done to control family size in the country. And on the other hand, census result 1961, the 1971 census results again showed that the population of India was growing at more than 2% rate per year. Nobody could imagine. When we started our planning process, it was thought that in a short period of time, our growth rate, which was around 1, will come to 0. But in place of coming to 0, it increased to 2%, and that 2% or more than 2% was sustained. That caused anxiety among the planners. Thus, the third 5-year plan stressed the role of intensive education, provision of facilities, and advice on the largest scale possible, and widespread popular effort in every rural and urban community as a matter of greatest significance. This paved the way for what we call extension education. Under the new approach, the main burden of the program was to educate the masses by appointing an army of extension educators or change agents. So Gandhian approach, then clinical approach, and then on the basis of KAP studies and the realization that people are not interested in family planning. So how to make them understand, how to provide them knowledge, how to motivate them, how to create more favorable attitude towards family planning. For this purpose, then extension education approach was followed. This was a third milestone, a new approach. Under this approach, although mass media was also to be utilized for promotion of idea in favor of birth control, but there was greater reliance on change agents, that in urban and rural areas, for urban and rural communities separately, at the grassroots level, certain change agents, you call them family planning workers, would be appointed, who will go door to door, talk to people, couples in reproductive ages, and discuss with them what are the advantages and disadvantages of large and small family, and why is it important for the nation to have population control, why is it important for the village or community or individuals to have a smaller number of children, and that it is possible to have a smaller number of children, what are the methods and where are they available. The idea is that by involving these educators, we create a climate in which more and more people go to clinics and seek advice of experts. Again, very soon the planners became disillusioned with extension education approach also. A feeling grew that something more has to be done. In between, in 1965, intrauterine contraceptive device or IUCD, sometimes called loop or copper T, this was introduced in the program. IUCD was known for its effectiveness and acceptance in several countries of the world, including Japan. And it was thought that introduction of IUCD in family planning program in India would solve India's problems. Initially, for a few years in 65, 66, 67, the number of acceptors of IUCD grew. That is also true. But gradually, the number of acceptors of IUCD started declining. There were all kinds of rumors particularly about bleeding, rumors that in some cases the thread or IUCD or the copper T, which was placed in woman's body, there were rumors that went up, and sometimes sophisticated surgical operation involving huge costs, only that could be removed. So it was unsafe, and bleeding is very common. This is a fact also that IUCD can lead to bleeding, but we know that this bleeding does not last long. It is only for a few days or a few weeks, and if a woman can tolerate that bleeding for a few days or a few weeks, then the bleeding subsides. But people were frightened. Already there was very poor motivation for family planning, and when through incentives or advice or counseling or advocacy people were taken to clinics and IUCDs were inserted, if it led to bleeding, obviously all kinds of rumors and anxieties, people got frightened. So the number of acceptors of IUCD started declining. Then during 1972-74, mass vasectomy camps were organized. This was the fourth milestone, you can say, in different parts of the country, and the incentive schemes were developed whereby the couples were given incentive in cash and kind for adopting sterilization as a method, and a large number of males were sterilized. In Ernakulam district of Kerala, there was one very dynamic district collector, Krishna Kumar. He started this mass vasectomy camps in Kerala, and lots of incentives were provided. One of his ideas was that initially people were shy to go for family planning. So if people are made to go for family planning in groups, in processions, in collective ways, then that shyness goes and there is greater acceptance. Incentives in a poor society like ours, incentives also work sometimes. If you tell that for those who will get sterilized in the mass vasectomy camps. So first in mass vasectomy camps, there are two advantages, mass and second incentive. So by making family planning acceptance mass, the traditional or individual early hesitation to go for family planning was removed, and through incentive then people were also attracted to this. So they were given radios, they were given transistors, they were given food grains, they were given cash incentives, different kinds of incentives were given. And people will come in procession, as though some marriage procession is coming or some religious procession is coming. So people will come in procession, get sterilized, get the incentive amount, and go back. And it was thought that this will make vasectomy more popular. Vasectomy means male operation. And this happened. A large number of males were sterilized in them. At some places, the approach appeared to be quite successful in attracting couples to family planning, as it used incentives as well as group approach to family planning. Incentives plus, sometimes people ask a question whether Muslims are also accepting family planning program. I could find report of a study of mass vasectomy camps in which the issue of religious composition was studied. And to my surprise, in the early days of mass vasectomy camps, Muslims came for family planning in a large number. I don't know why. Communal tendency got increased later or what happened. But and this is not the case that there was any religious bias in family planning, at least not in the early days of mass vasectomy camps, and not in Kerala. Kerala anyway is a different population with disproportionately higher proportion of Muslims and Christians, and it's a more secular kind of society than many other states in the country. So everybody came. Hindus came, Muslims came, rural people, urban, educated, uneducated, from diverse occupations, all kinds of people came for mass vasectomy camps. It became a very successful thing, and therefore it was repeated in several other states of the country. Still, the family planning program failed to make headway and affect the figures of growth of population. So 1981 census figures again, 1971, 1981 census figures again showed a growth rate of more than 2%. There were several reasons. Patriarchy, because of which males were unwilling to bear the burden of family planning. If you look at the statistics of family planning today, you find that majority of acceptors of family planning are acceptors of female sterilization. Although female sterilization is much more complicated an operation as compared to male sterilization, but in majority of cases it is women who are sent for sterilization and not the men. Then there were rumors. In surveys we encounter various types of rumors that after sterilization people become weak, or they cannot ride a bicycle, or they cannot take up agricultural work, or they become sexually impotent, all kinds of rumors. It is possible that since the average age of sterilization was quite high and people were ignorant about biology of reproduction and sterilization, so anything happens to them after sterilization, they will attribute this to sterilization. So suppose somebody develops a heart disease, they will say that this is because of sterilization, although we know that there is no connection between cardiovascular diseases and sterilization. But in rural, ignorant, traditional, illiterate society, all kinds of rumors were spread, and in some cases there was also failure of the method, which means that even after sterilization some couples produce children, and there were fraudulent means to motivate people to adopt family planning, means lot of fudgification or cooking up of data. Family planning program was given utmost importance during the emergency time, when the acceptors were drawn by a technique which was quite contrary to the basic philosophy of the extension approach. Use of coercion augmented the family planning achievements in all the states, and some states which were always behind the target in fact exceeded the target. Students of sociology can very well understand that if targets are given to government officers, including police officers, you are distributing targets for sterilization to all kinds of people, including teachers, police officers, thanedar, revenue officials, income tax, sale tax, in all departments. If you give such targets to grassroots workers, they will go to people and try to convince them about utility. So this family planning program was given utmost importance during the emergency time. There were many other points in 20-point program of the then Prime Minister. Family planning was one of the most important things. When the acceptors were drawn by a technique which was quite contrary to the basic philosophy of extension education, or giving knowledge, imparting knowledge, communication, there was coercion. This can be easily understood that if you give, I have seen one article on coercion in family planning in emergency time, and the basic idea was that if you give targets to police department, what other method can they use other than coercion? You tell a police wala that up to this month you will have to produce 5 cases. I remember I was a student at that time. The coercion was so much, even for getting a science subject at 11th standard, in intermediate, at 11th standard, children were asked to produce sterilization certificates of their parents. All departments, education, police, revenue, income tax, sales tax, roadways, railways, everywhere, government servants were given targets for family plan. And there was even a talk of making sterilization compulsory after 3 children. And some states had even passed legislation to this effect. Maharashtra was one. Population growth was viewed as a national problem of urgency, and the whole bureaucratic infrastructure was used to assist in the program, as though this is the most important program of Government of India. The number of sterilizations increased to a big figure from only 942,000 in 1973-74, 942 in thousands, 2669 in 75-76. That means in 2 years' time, number of sterilization increased roughly 3 times. In 76-77, the following year, the number increased to 8,261,000. So you see, in 3 years' time, from 942,000 to you have 8261, 9 times. In 3 years' time, in a country like ours, number of sterilizations increasing 9 times. Certainly, this is not due to any evolution or sudden rise in consciousness or empowerment or anything. This was due to coercion. So at this stage, 2 phenomena were marked. The family planning program degenerated into sterilization program. All other things were ignored. Condoms, IUCD, all other things, or knowledge or rhythm or natural method. Everybody was talking about sterilization only. So family planning program degenerated into sterilization program. And second, population control became a political issue. And therefore, when the parliamentary elections were fought after that, they were fought essentially on the issue of family planning, and the Congress party lost election. Then something must be said about cafeteria, because this cafeteria approach is very popular in family planning literature in India. In the third 5-year plan, family planning was made a target-oriented program, and the target was to reduce birth rate to 25 by 1973. Later on, it was modified to as early as possible, realizing that it may not be possible to reduce birth rate to 25 by 73. It was said as early as possible. And a cafeteria approach was then adopted to provide a range of effective and approved family planning methods according to needs and preferences of individuals. Condom, diaphragm, jelly, cream, foam tablets for newly married couples, IUCD for couples with 1 or 2 children, and sterilization for couples who have completed their desired family size. By 1980, the term cafeteria approach became a buzzword in family planning program, and the influence of this approach continued. It may also be said that while we have more catchphrases in family planning today, the idea that the needy couples must be informed about all the methods of family planning, and all methods of family planning must be accessible to them so that they can practice one according to their own considerations, continues. Broadly speaking, the different family planning methods are divided into 2 categories: terminal and spacing. Terminal, which are used when couples have already completed their desired family size, and spacing when they are used to create gap between successive childbirth. For example, a young couple may produce a baby quickly after marriage, but may like to have another child after 4 or 5 years. They can use condom or IUCD. When they want a child, they may discontinue the method and plan a baby. Now, under cafeteria approach, it was thought that we should motivate younger couples to go for delayed childbirth and use spacing methods rather than focus on aged couples and motivate them to go for sterilization. In the context of high and natural fertility, the fertility impact of terminal methods may be much more than that of, spacing, it should be spacing. In the context of high and natural fertility, fertility impact of spacing methods must be much more than that of terminal method. The basic idea behind cafeteria approach still continues. It recognizes that different people have different needs based on their religion, age. Like Muslims may not go for sterilization, but they may go for condom, or they may go for IUCD. Age, younger people may need spacing methods, older people may need terminal methods. Then there are different family size preferences, economic conditions, and many other factors. So you have a more differentiated approach to family planning. The state policy should be to provide a method of their choice, means choice of couples, and not insist on any particular method as it happened during emergency time when the total attention of the program was focused on statistics of sterilization, creating lot of cooking up of data, vested interest in showing high achievements, decline in the quality of acceptors. Ironically, most users of family planning have gone for female sterilization. This is a situation that has not changed till now. And this works against the policy of cafeteria. So in principle we talk of cafeteria approach, but in practice we have female sterilization. Of late, Government of India wants more couples to use condoms rather than other methods, and that is more because of consideration of stopping the AIDS epidemic. Sterilization can help in limiting family size, but sterilization will not help us in fighting against spread of HIV/AIDS epidemic. So attention is shifting to condoms. But the fact remains that in different states, 1 to maximum 5% couples are using condoms. Most of the couples who have gone for modern or effective methods of family planning are using female sterilization. This is a sociological issue. Why in India majority of couples are using female sterilization, while there are other simpler, easy to use, inexpensive methods which do not require any surgical operation. Now in India, fertility has declined partly due to family planning program and partly due to development, but not to the desired level. The issue is, has family planning program in India failed? One can argue both. I thought that at the end of this lecture I will quote something from Tim Dyson. So I will do that. So essentially today what we have talked about, that before independence there was ideas in favor of population control. Then in 1952 we went for Gandhian approach towards family planning. Then we had clinical approach, KP studies, researches. In 60 to 70 we had extension education and experimentation, IUCD, target orientation. 70 to 80 may be called the period of camp approach, mass vasectomy camps starting from Ernakulam district of Kerala, and similar experiments conducted in other states with mass acceptance of the method. Then cafeteria approach, then target. After 1990 there was a realization that this target oriented approach or concentration on sterilization etc. are not producing results. Who want to use family planning method because they are educated, enlightened, aware, developed, or among whom there is a transition of values of children, they are going for limiting family size. Among others, family planning program, family planning communication is not working much. So it was decided then that we will have a target free approach, and the purpose of target free approach should be to create more awareness and make family planning methods available to masses. Then in 2000 we have National Population Policy. We will have one full hour discussion on population policy one day. So this is a quote from Tim Dyson. The Indian family planning program is often dismissed as a failure, but in my view this is an unjust and rather too simple characterization. Among other things, the program's proper evaluation would need to take account of 1. The sheer size and complexity of the task which it has had to tackle, namely reducing the birth rate in a huge, poorly educated and largely rural population. 2. The aforementioned fact that in many respects India has been a pioneer. This is most commonly illustrated by the statement that it was the first country in the world to announce an official family planning program in 1952. But actually India has led the world in many other ways too, like the development of several methods of sterilization. The main point I am making, however, is that it is particularly difficult to be a pioneer, and that pioneers inevitably tend to make more mistakes than those who follow. And third, the fact that in the past some politicians have shied away from their duty of ensuring that Indian women and men have a real right to choose. By this I mean their responsibility of making sure that everyone has access to safe, effective and affordable methods of contraception. Indeed, there are still significant parts of the country where this right to choose needs to be expanded, but this requires political backing and greater resources. Of course, India's family planning program has had its failings. For example, it has been much too target bound, and for much too long it has badly neglected the promotion of reversible, what I call spacing methods, forms of contraception. Today about 80% of all married women who are currently using a modern method of contraception are relying upon sterilization. Dyson wrote this in 2003, but the situation has not changed yet. Nevertheless, despite its problems, there can be little doubt that the Indian birth rate would be somewhat higher today, and the country's population would be larger still if the family planning program had not existed. And we can say this in 2010 much more confidently, because we know that our total fertility rate has already come below 3, and in several states we have already reached replacement level fertility. So its family planning program in India has several milestones and a history of rise and fall, optimism and pessimism and different experiments. Today I was able to show that the major experiments in this field were Gandhian, clinical, extension education, mass vasectomy camps and a cafeteria approach, and now we have rights-based approach. We will spend one full hour on rights-based approach when we come to National Population Policy 2000. Thank you. This is all that I wanted to say today. We are also taking some new initiatives in the field of education, health, empowerment, Millennium Development Goals, inclusionary growth, and RTI, STI, including HIV/AIDS. I hope that you are provoked to ask one or two questions.
Sir, please, India was the first country in the world to officially introduce the family planning in 1952. Actually, it is cited as the reason for that. There is no national population policy up to 2000. That is the reason, because already you have a family planning program. So there is no, but this national population policy.
So that means without declaring, without making a formal population policy statement, okay, we were implementing a policy.
But
yes, you are right.
National population policy also focus on family planning. There are so many methods to regulate or to control the population. But this national population policy also more focused on family planning. I think in my not focused on the other aspects of there are so many other aspects to control the population. But why this? Because we introduced in 1952, but after 50 years also we are focused on this issue, that is family planning, lot of other ways to control the population. But
in National Population Policy 2000, so as you are right that we were implementing a policy without formally announcing it.
Okay.
And the major difficulty in arriving at a formal policy statement was that in a democratic and diverse country like ours, parliamentarians were finding it difficult to develop a draft on which there can be consensus from all political parties, religious groups, NGOs, experts, academicians, and other civil society actors. And anyway, if the purpose was to reduce growth rate of population, we were running family planning program. But in National Population Policy 2000, two things were marked. One, that our ability to develop a consensual model. So now we have consensus. Our policy has been signed by the President of India, and there is a consensus regarding this policy document among all sections of diverse sections, different political parties and civil society groups. And second thing, there is a paradigm shift. So far there is a feeling that this target, we had more of target orientation, more of coercion, and more focus on sterilization. Now in place of target orientation, we are moving towards satisfying the unmet needs. And let there be no targets. Let us identify which people, which couples want to use family planning methods, and we create such mechanism. We provide them all the knowledge and facilities so that they can choose their own method for implementing their plans. Second is consensus, and third is a paradigm shift from family planning to rights-based approach. And in this so-called rights-based approach, we are focusing more on education, health, and now the idea is that much of the statistics of family planning that we have for the past are unreliable due to target orientation, coercion, incentive, disincentives. Lot of cooking up of data also took place, and the quality of acceptance of family planning was not good. If somebody has already produced 5 or 6 children and is going or she is going for sterilization, what are we achieving? What is its impact on births averted or reduction of birth rate? But if you have a rights-based approach, you bring younger couples under the aegis of this population control program. That is much better, and the quality of the quality of acceptance, quality of acceptors of family planning in terms of age, socioeconomic background, education, state or region, urban, rural, caste, community would be much better. If you go for rights-based approach, then the quality of acceptance of family planning, it's not only numbers, but the composition of acceptors of family planning would also be more favorable to population control, and will also be consistent with the value system of our constitution, directive principles, or value system of India. Thank you.